You are driving through the New Mexico desert, and then, out of nowhere, a town appears. Not ruins, an actual town. Buildings still standing, signs still up, streets still laid out as if people just stepped away for a moment and never came back. There is a gas station with the price sign frozen in another era, a hotel with keys still on the hooks, and somewhere behind all of it, a cemetery full of white crosses with no living town left to explain them. 9 towns in New Mexico are still out there like this, each one emptied for a reason stranger than the last. We are going to count them down one by one, starting from the least known and working our way to the one that will genuinely surprise you. Number 9 is where we begin. Number 9, Golden. Before the California Gold Rush made the history books, there was Golden. According to historical accounts, this town along the Turquoise Trail was the site of the first major gold rush west of the Mississippi River, beginning as far back as 1825, decades before anyone rushed to California. Originally called Rio de San Francisco, the town drew thousands of miners hoping to strike it rich near Tuerto Creek, and for a moment, it delivered. But the gold found there was not the kind that lasts. It depleted quickly, the population scattered, and the post office quietly closed in 1928, as if making it official. What remains today is a small community along the scenic Turquoise Trail, anchored by the old San Francisco de Assis Catholic Church and a rustic general store. It is easy to drive through Golden and miss what it once was. Most people do. Was a town built on the very first Western gold rush really destined to be one of the most overlooked places in New Mexico? It turns out, yes. Number 8, Fierro. If Golden represents an early beginning, Fierro represents a slow industrial ending. Located in Grant County, Fierro was built around iron ore, zinc, and copper mining from the late 1800s onward. Waves of workers and settlers moved in, drawn by what looked like a reliable and lasting industry. According to authors who have chronicled America's ghost towns, Fierro's boom began to fade in the mid to late 20th century, as demand declined and profits shrank, leading to the gradual shutdown of large-scale mining operations. There was no single law that changed it, and no single disaster that ended it. The economy quietly stopped working, and people left when there was no longer a reason to stay. What remains now is rubble, rusted mining infrastructure, and crumbling buildings, standing as a silent witness to a bygone industrial era. Of all the towns on this list, Fierro's ending is perhaps the least dramatic, and, in some ways, the most telling. Number 7, Duran. Duran is a town that existed entirely in service of a technology that no longer exists. Founded in 1902 at the junction of the El Paso and Northeastern Railway and the Southern Pacific Line, it was built specifically to service steam locomotives, equipped with repair facilities and water depots that kept trains moving through the region. When railroad routes shifted and steam engines were replaced by diesel, Duran's importance faded quickly. Rail traffic dropped, and local businesses could not survive without it. A few old stone buildings and abandoned rail warehouses still line the tracks, which are now rarely used. It is a straightforward story, and that is almost what makes it strange. Duran did not suffer a disaster or a market crash. It simply became unnecessary, and that was enough. Number 6, Ancho. Ancho carries one of the more surprising details in this entire countdown. The town came to life after the railroad arrived in 1901, which made it possible to open the Ancho brick plant, a facility that used local clay and gypsum deposits to produce bricks on a large scale. Those bricks were used to help rebuild San Francisco after the devastating 1906 earthquake. A town most Americans have never heard of quietly helped rebuild one of the most famous cities in the country. But the brick plant closed in 1921, and Ancho never really recovered from that loss. The final blow came in the 1950s, when US Highway 54 was rerouted more than 2 miles away from town. That kind of bypass does not happen fast. It is a slow suffocation, where passing traffic that once fed local businesses simply starts going somewhere else, and the businesses quietly disappear one by one. Today, Ancho is a sun-baked shell of its former self. A few original buildings remain, including an active church and an abandoned train depot, all situated on private property. It stands as a precise reminder of how decisions made in distant planning offices can end entire communities without anyone in those communities having a vote. And this is where it stops being a collection of isolated stories. Every single town so far lost its footing the moment one external force changed direction. Whether that was a resource running dry, a law being passed, or a highway being rerouted 2 miles east, the towns had no say. The question worth sitting with is, did any of them see it coming? Number 5. Dawson. Dawson is the entry on this list that is hardest to look away from. Founded in 1901, it was not a rough frontier camp, but a fully built company town with a hospital, a golf course, an opera house, and a large general store. Thousands of miners and their families lived there. It functioned more like a self-contained small city than anything else. But Dawson was struck by 2 of the worst mining disasters in American history. In 1913, an explosion killed 263 people. A decade later, in 1923, another blast killed 100 more. And yet, mining continued after both disasters, which tells you something about the economic gravity that kept people attached to the place despite everything they had witnessed. What ended Dawson was not another explosion, it was diesel. When railroads switched from coal to diesel engines in the 1950s, demand for coal fell sharply. The company shut down the mines, sold off the buildings, and the entire town was physically dismantled. Not abandoned, but taken apart and removed piece by piece. Nothing remains of Dawson today except a large, well-kept cemetery where rows of identical white crosses stand in quiet tribute to the people who never made it out. Would you have stayed in a town that had already lived through 2 of the worst mining disasters in American history because the job was still there? A lot of people did, right up until there was no town left to stay in. Number 4. Glenrio. Not every town on this list was killed by mining or industry. Some were killed by a highway going in a slightly different direction than expected. Glenrio straddles the state line between Texas and New Mexico. It grew with the rise of Route 66 in the 1930s, serving cross-country travelers with motels, gas stations, and iconic roadside cafes. For anyone driving the Mother Road from coast to coast, Glenrio was a stop, a meal, a place to rest. Then, Interstate 40 was built in the late 1960s and bypassed Glenrio completely. Traffic vanished almost overnight, and businesses closed shortly after. Today, Glenrio is one of the most photographed ghost towns along the old Route 66 corridor. Its retro gas station, motel, and cafes still stand, empty but physically intact, which creates an unsettling feeling for anyone who passes through. The buildings are fine, structurally intact and largely unchanged, which makes the absence of everyone who used to be in them feel even stranger. Number 3. Chloride in Kingston. In 1880, a prospector named Harry Pye discovered silver in what had recently been dangerous Apache territory, and the town of Chloride appeared within a year. A community of around 300 people with a general store, saloons, blacksmiths, and its own newspaper called the Black Range. 2 years later, in 1882, Kingston emerged from another silver discovery in the same Black Range Mountains. Kingston scaled considerably higher, reaching a peak population of 7,000 people with more than 20 saloons, 3 hotels, and an opera house that attracted famous singers of the era. Both towns ended on the same day for the same reason. In 1893, the United States government repealed the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, and silver prices collapsed overnight. The mines in both Chloride and Kingston became unprofitable almost simultaneously, and within weeks, the majority of residents had packed up and left. By 1900, only a handful of people remained in Kingston. 2 separate towns, separate founders, separate histories, and the same collapse. Not because the silver ran out, but because Washington changed a law and silver prices crashed overnight. Chloride today is considered one of the best preserved ghost towns in New Mexico, with its Pioneer Store Museum still holding authentic artifacts from the 1890s. Kingston has a small number of permanent residents and several standing historic buildings along Highway 152. They both survived physically. As living towns, they ended the same afternoon in 1893. Is this a cycle or something more structural? Because what keeps emerging across this entire list is the same story. Single resource towns with no contingency, hit by forces they could not predict or resist. Number 2. Elizabethtown. There is a description that used to follow Elizabethtown: the fastest to rise and the fastest to fall. That turned out to be a fair summary. Founded in 1866 after a major gold discovery along Willow Creek, Elizabethtown became almost immediately the first incorporated town in the entire New Mexico territory. Its population surged into the thousands. There were miners, saloons, hotels, and an opera house. Because in 1866 in New Mexico, building an opera house was apparently a standard part of town planning. But the gold that started all of this was the easily mined surface kind, the kind that runs out quickly when thousands of people are all extracting it at once. Combined with brutal winters, persistent water shortages, and what the historical record describes as the highest murder rate in the entire region, the town began emptying steadily. Then, in 1872, a vital water pipe broke, and that turned out to be enough. Most of the remaining residents left for good. Today, Elizabethtown sits near Eagle Nest Lake, surrounded by scenic mountains. A few abandoned homes, stone foundations, and historical markers are all that remain of a place that once carried genuine civic ambition. The opera house is gone. The thousands of people are gone. What persists is the outline of a decision made with absolute confidence in a future that, within 6 years of its founding, had already begun to unravel. Before the final entry, it is worth noting what all 9 of these towns have in common. None of them was built by people who thought they were building something temporary. Every single one was constructed with the assumption of permanence. That assumption, more than any mine or railroad or highway, is what each of them got wrong. Number 1. Shakespeare. The number 1 spot belongs to Shakespeare. And not just because of the name, though the name does help. Originally a Butterfield Overland Trail stage stop called Mexican Springs, the town was renamed Shakespeare during a brief silver boom, and quickly developed a reputation for being unusual. In an era when frontier towns were almost universally defined by their saloons, Shakespeare banned them. It became known instead as a town that refused to turn into the stereotypical cowboy settlement, though it apparently found other ways to attract illegal activity regardless. The railroad skipped it, the silver deposits dried up, and yet Shakespeare did not disappear the way so many others did. It did not fade into rubble or get dismantled for parts. Instead, Shakespeare is today privately owned and preserved with a level of authenticity that is genuinely uncommon among ghost towns of this era. It opens occasionally to the public for paid tours. There are no souvenir shops, no modern restaurants, no gift store selling Shakespeare-branded merchandise. Just the town, preserved as close to its original state as its owners have been able to maintain. That unusual outcome, a ghost town preserved not by a government agency, but by private ownership, and what appears to be genuine historical commitment, is what earns it the top spot. Every other town on this list is either ruins, a managed historic site, or a very quiet, surviving community. Shakespeare is something harder to categorize. A ghost town that refused both total collapse and commercial reinvention. 9 towns. 9 versions of the same story about ambition, timing, and how quickly something that felt permanent can become a set of stone foundations in a desert. The people who built these places were not naive. They were responding to a real opportunity with real effort. It is just that the ground beneath every one of them was always more temporary than it looked. And if that idea interests you, the next video takes this even further, into places that should not still exist, but somehow do. You will want to see it. I'll keep finding the world's hidden corners. You just have to click subscribe to come along.